Welcome. Let's start with something simple. Can you tell me what transaction processing is?
Sure. Transaction processing refers to the sequence of activities that occur when a business records and manages transactions. It involves capturing transaction data, verifying it, processing it, and updating records. This ensures that transactions are handled accurately and efficiently, whether it's in a financial system or a business operation.
Great. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges in transaction processing?
One major challenge is data accuracy. Even small errors can lead to significant issues down the line. Then there's fraud prevention, which is especially critical in industries like banking. We also face timeliness challenges. Transactions must be processed quickly, especially in real-time environments. Lastly, there's regulatory compliance, making sure all transactions follow legal requirements, which can vary by region.
Good points. How do you ensure that you maintain accuracy and attention to detail in your work?
I believe in a systematic approach. I always double-check data before entering it into the system, especially for complex transactions. I also use automated tools to minimize human error and ensure consistency. Whenever possible, I verify transaction details against source documents or systems before processing them. And if I ever feel uncertain, I take the time to review it more thoroughly before moving forward.
Nice. Now, what's your take on batch processing versus real-time processing? Which one would you prefer in transaction processing?
Both have their strengths depending on the situation. Real-time processing is best for situations where transactions need to be reflected immediately, like in online payments or banking. However, batch processing is more efficient for larger volumes of transactions that don't need instant updates, such as payroll processing or billing. I think the choice between the two depends on the urgency and volume of transactions involved.
Great insight. Now, let's say there's a backlog of transactions to process. How would you handle the pressure?
When there's a backlog, I prioritize the most urgent transactions first, anything that requires immediate attention or has deadlines. Then, I break down the remaining tasks into smaller, manageable chunks and tackle them one step at a time. Staying organized and calm helps me stay efficient, and if necessary, I would communicate with my team or manager to see if we need additional support to meet deadlines.
Sounds like a good strategy. How do you handle a situation where there's a sudden system downtime and you are in the middle of processing transactions?
System downtimes can certainly be stressful, but the first thing I would do is remain calm and assess the situation. I would follow the company's protocol for reporting downtime, typically by notifying the IT department or my manager. Meanwhile, I'd stop processing transactions to avoid any errors. Once the system is back online, I would carefully check the backlog, prioritize transactions based on urgency, and resume processing. If it's a recurring issue, I'd suggest working with IT to improve system reliability or have contingency plans in place for future disruptions.
How would you deal with a customer or client who's upset about a mistake in their transaction?
First and foremost, I'd listen to the customer's concerns without interrupting, so they feel heard. I would empathize with their situation and assure them I'm going to help resolve the issue. Then, I'd investigate the transaction and verify the details to identify the mistake. Once the error is identified, I'd explain to the customer what went wrong and what steps I'm taking to correct it. If necessary, I'd offer any compensation or follow-up support. I believe clear communication and a positive attitude go a long way in maintaining trust and satisfaction.
That's a good approach. Moving on, in transaction processing, audit trails are important. Can you explain what they are and why they're necessary?
An audit trail is a chronological record of all transactions and changes made within a system. It tracks every action, such as who initiated the transaction, what changes were made, and when they occurred. Audit trails are essential because they provide transparency and accountability. In case of errors, fraud, or discrepancies, they allow for a detailed investigation into what happened and who was responsible. They also ensure that the organization can comply with regulatory requirements.
Exactly. Let's say you're asked to process a transaction, but the documentation provided seems incomplete or unclear. How would you proceed?
If I encounter incomplete or unclear documentation, I wouldn't proceed with processing the transaction immediately. I would review the available information as thoroughly as possible and then reach out to the relevant parties, like the customer, supervisor, or other departments, to clarify the missing details. I'd document my efforts to resolve the issue and ensure I have all the necessary information before processing. If there's a risk of delaying the transaction, I'd inform the relevant stakeholders about the situation.
Good thinking. Transaction processing often requires working with others. How do you collaborate with team members or other departments when necessary?
I believe communication is key when working with a team. If I need assistance, I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to my colleagues for clarification or support. I also understand that in transaction processing, different departments, e.g., finance, customer service, IT, might be involved. I make sure to stay organized and proactive, sharing updates and asking for help when needed. I'm always open to collaboration to ensure the process is as efficient and accurate as possible.
Collaboration is definitely important. One last question. What makes you a strong fit for this position?
I believe my attention to detail, strong organizational skills, and ability to handle pressure make me a good fit for this role. I'm comfortable with high-volume environments and have a strong track record of ensuring accuracy in all my transactions. I also understand the importance of meeting deadlines and working collaboratively with a team. I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute my skills and learn new ones in this role.
Let's dive a bit deeper into the technical aspects. Can you explain what you understand by the term data integrity and how it applies to transaction processing?
Data integrity refers to the accuracy, consistency, and reliability of data throughout its life cycle. In transaction processing, it's essential to ensure that the data entered into the system is complete and correct. This means avoiding duplication, ensuring that transaction amounts are accurate, and making sure that data is not tampered with during processing. To maintain data integrity, we must follow strict validation checks, use encryption, and implement controls to prevent unauthorized access.
That's a good explanation. What do you think about manual versus automated transaction processing? When would you prefer one over the other?
Automated transaction processing is generally more efficient, especially for high-volume environments where speed and accuracy are critical. It reduces the chances of human error and ensures consistency. However, manual processing can be beneficial when dealing with complex transactions that require human judgment, or if the automated system encounters an error. I think a combination of both is ideal, depending on the nature of the transactions and the level of oversight needed.
Interesting. Could you walk me through the steps you would take if you were asked to process a high-priority transaction with a tight deadline?
In a high-priority scenario, I would first ensure that I have all the necessary documentation and information for the transaction. I would verify the transaction details to ensure accuracy before starting the process. Then, I'd prioritize that transaction over others to avoid any delays. I would process it swiftly but with care, checking each step for accuracy. After completing the transaction, I would double-check that everything has been correctly recorded and report the completion to my supervisor. If I anticipated any delays, I'd communicate those promptly to stakeholders.
That sounds like an effective approach. What steps would you take to handle a situation where a transaction is flagged for potential fraud?
If a transaction is flagged for potential fraud, I would follow the established procedures for handling such cases. First, I would review the transaction details to identify any red flags, like unusual amounts, inconsistent account information, or suspicious timing. I would then escalate the matter to the fraud prevention team or supervisor and work with them to investigate the issue further. It's crucial to take immediate action to prevent any potential fraud while ensuring that the customer or transaction parties are treated fairly.
Great. You seem to have a solid understanding of fraud prevention. Can you tell me how you would handle a situation where you're asked to process a transaction that doesn't seem to follow the company's policies?
In such a situation, I would first review the company's policies and procedures to verify whether the transaction indeed violates any rules. If it does, I wouldn't proceed with the transaction. I would notify my manager or the appropriate team immediately, explaining the situation. Transparency is key in these cases to ensure compliance with company policies. If there's a gray area or ambiguity, I would seek clarification before moving forward.
Good decision-making. How do you deal with a situation where you have to process multiple transactions simultaneously under tight deadlines?
In that case, I would prioritize the transactions based on their urgency and importance. I would focus on completing the most time-sensitive transactions first while organizing the remaining ones in order of priority. Time management is key, so I would stay focused and avoid distractions. I also believe in staying organized, so I would keep a checklist or use task management tools to ensure I don't miss anything important. If there's a risk of delays, I would communicate it to my team or manager as early as possible.
That's a solid plan. What do you think is the most important quality for someone working in transaction processing to have?
I believe attention to detail is the most important quality. In transaction processing, even small errors can have serious consequences, such as financial discrepancies or compliance issues. Being meticulous ensures that transactions are accurate, and following established procedures helps prevent issues. Also, the ability to work under pressure and stay organized is essential, especially when dealing with high-volume transactions.
Good point. Moving on, how do you ensure that you're meeting compliance and regulatory standards in transaction processing?
I always make sure to stay updated on relevant laws and regulations affecting the industry I work in. This includes reviewing company policies regularly to ensure we're aligned with current compliance standards. When processing transactions, I double-check that all required documentation is present and correct. I also follow a consistent process for verifying transactions, ensuring they meet the regulatory requirements for the jurisdiction in which they are being processed. If anything feels out of line, I would escalate the issue for further review.
It's important to stay on top of compliance. How would you respond to a situation where you make a mistake in a transaction processing task?
If I made a mistake, I would immediately acknowledge it and correct the error as soon as I noticed. The first thing I would do is investigate to understand the nature of the mistake, whether it was a data entry error or an issue with the transaction itself. I would then make the necessary corrections and notify the relevant team members or supervisor so they're aware of the change. I'd also look for ways to prevent similar mistakes from happening again, such as reviewing processes or implementing additional checks.
Excellent. How do you ensure you're maintaining a good relationship with your colleagues while working on transactions?
Maintaining clear and open communication is key. I make an effort to be approachable and ready to collaborate when needed. If I have questions or need assistance, I reach out respectfully and promptly. I also keep my colleagues updated on the progress of tasks or any potential issues, which helps keep everyone aligned. Mutual support is important, especially when deadlines are tight, and we're all working toward a common goal.
It seems like you have a good approach to teamwork. Lastly, why do you want to work as a transaction processing associate at our company?
I'm very interested in this role because I enjoy the challenge of ensuring accuracy and efficiency in processing transactions. I've read about your company's reputation for innovation and customer service, and I believe my attention to detail, organizational skills, and experience in transaction processing would be a great fit here. I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to your team and continue growing in this field.